The night before my wedding, I sat on my parents' porch steps and listened to myself decide whether to become someone new or finally become fully myself. Let me take you back to where this started. My name is Naomi Calloway. I'm 29 years old. I'm an architect at a small historic preservation firm in Charleston, South Carolina. The kind of work where you spend your days making sure old, beautiful things stay standing. I'm better at that with buildings than I was, for a long time, with myself. If this is your first time here, hit like, subscribe, and tell me your city in the comments. I read every one. I met Elijah Marsh at a friend's birthday dinner at a restaurant on East Bay Street, the kind of place with exposed brick and candles stuck in old wine bottles. He was a high school history teacher, 32, with the specific patience of a man who spends his days explaining things to teenagers and has learned not to rush anyone toward an answer. He asked me what I did. I told him I restored old buildings. He said, "So you're in the business of proving things can survive damage and still be beautiful." I laughed, mostly because it landed closer to true than he could have known. We dated for over a year. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market on Marion Square. Long walks along the Battery at dusk, when the light turns the water the color of weak tea. He proposed in April 2025, on the porch of his grandmother's house on Johns Island, where the live oaks lean so far over the road they form a tunnel. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We set the wedding for June 2026. Her mother's church, 110 guests. My mother, Denise, already 3 months into planning centerpieces by the time the ring was even sized. There was one thing I hadn't told him. I need to go back further, to something that happened 4 months before I ever met him. I was living alone at the time, in a 4th-floor unit at the Rutledge Apartments off Upper King Street. I'd come home late from a client dinner, taken the elevator up alone, the way I had 100 times before. The building's exterior door lock had been broken for weeks. Residents had filed complaints about it going back months. I didn't know that yet. I would learn it later, and it would matter more than I could have imagined that night. I was assaulted in that elevator by a man I had never seen before and have not seen since that night, until much later than I expected. I'm not going to walk you through the details of what happened. Some things don't need to be relived to be understood, and I've decided, deliberately, that this story is about what I did with what happened to me, not about the worst 5 minutes of my life. I reported it that night. I gave a statement. The case was assigned to Charleston PD's Special Victims Unit, to a detective named Carla DeVoe, a steady, direct woman who treated me like a person rather than a file. 3 months later, in February 2024, at a routine follow-up exam, I learned I had contracted HSV-2, herpes simplex virus, type 2, as a result of the assault. It is a manageable, lifelong condition. With antiviral medication and simple precautions, people who carry it live full, healthy, intimate lives. The stigma around it is wildly out of proportion to what it actually is medically. I know that clearly and rationally and completely in the daytime. At 2 in the morning, rational knowledge doesn't always win. The case went cold within a few months. No matching DNA in the database. No witnesses. No camera footage. The elevator camera had been disabled somehow, though at the time nobody could say exactly how. I met Elijah 1 month later. I told myself I'd tell him when the time was right. Then I told myself that again, for a year and a half. We'd chosen to do the old tradition, spending the last night apart, me at my parents' house on Rutledge Avenue, him at his own place across town. I sat with my mother in the kitchen for a while, and then I told her I needed some air, and I went out to sit on the porch steps alone. I had rehearsed telling Elijah probably 200 times in my head over 18 months. Every version ended the same way in my imagination, with him looking at me differently. Not with cruelty, just with a kind of careful distance, like I'd become something fragile he now had to manage, rather than someone he simply loved. I sat on those steps for almost an hour. Then I picked up my phone and called him. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, everything okay?" "I need to tell you something," I said. "Before tomorrow. I should have told you a long time ago and I didn't, because I was scared of exactly this moment, and I need you to just listen." There was a pause, then quietly, "Okay, I'm listening." I told him everything. The building, the elevator, the exam 3 months later, the 18 months of silence I'd built around it, brick by brick, the way you'd shore up a foundation you were afraid was cracking. He didn't say anything for what felt like a long time. "Naomi," he finally said, "I noticed something was off, back in the spring. I actually thought you were having second thoughts about me. I never once thought it might be this. I'm so sorry you carried that thinking I'd make it about myself if you told me. I started crying on that porch step, and for once, it wasn't the exhausted, fearful kind of crying. It was something closer to relief. I still want to marry you tomorrow, he said. That hasn't moved an inch. But Naomi, I want to ask you something, and I need you to actually hear it as a real question, not a formality. Do you want to marry me tomorrow? Or do you need more time, now that you're not carrying this alone? I thought about it, really thought about it, sitting on those steps. I want to marry you, I said, but I also want to do one more thing first. I want to reopen my case. I've known for a year I had information the detective never had, and I let it sit because I didn't want to look at any of it. I don't want to walk down an aisle tomorrow still choosing silence over myself. Then let's do that first, Elijah said. The wedding will still be there. The wedding did happen the next afternoon, exactly as planned, at my mother's church on Calhoun Street. But that morning, before hair and makeup, I sat at my parents' kitchen table with my laptop open, pulling up something I hadn't looked at in over a year. The original building schematics for the Rutledge apartments, which I'd once used, back when I still lived there, to help a neighbor figure out a maintenance dispute. I'm an architect. I read buildings the way other people read faces. And looking at that elevator maintenance panel diagram again, with a year and a half of professional experience behind me that I hadn't had the first time I'd looked at it, I noticed something. The camera override switch wasn't accessible from the elevator car itself, or from the lobby panel most tenants assumed controlled it. It was accessible only from a locked utility closet on the 3rd floor, a closet that required a specific facilities key, issued to exactly one category of person: contracted maintenance staff. I called Detective DeVoe that morning, still in my robe, hair not yet done. I think I know something that might narrow this down, I said. I should have looked at this sooner. She didn't tell me it was too late. She said, send me what you have. And Naomi, congratulations on today. This isn't going anywhere. We'll pick it back up Monday. I got married that afternoon. My father walked me down the aisle in the same church where my parents had married 31 years earlier. Elijah cried during his vows, which he was mortified about, and which I loved him for completely. We postponed the honeymoon, a week in the Blue Ridge we'd booked for the following week, and stayed in Charleston instead. Not out of obligation, because for the first time in 18 months, I actually wanted to be present for what came next, instead of hiding from it. Detective DeVoe picked the case back up with the maintenance key information as a new thread. The Rutledge Apartments contracted its maintenance through a company called Ashworth Property Group, which serviced several buildings across the peninsula. Cross-referencing key access logs, which the company initially claimed weren't retained until their own vendors' records turned up an archived copy, narrowed the list to 4 maintenance staff with 3rd-floor closet access during the relevant window. While that process moved forward, I did something Detective DeVoe hadn't asked me to do, but didn't discourage either. I posted, carefully and without identifying details, in a private Charleston tenants advocacy group online, asking if anyone had experienced a similar incident in a building serviced by the same maintenance company. 2 women responded. Both had filed reports at different buildings, both serviced by Ashworth Property Group, both within the prior 3 years. Neither case had ever been connected to the other, because no one had ever had a reason to look across buildings instead of within just one. I forwarded both names to Detective DeVoe. She told me later that the pattern was the single most useful piece of information anyone had brought her in the entire case. Once the pattern was established, a subpoena of Ashworth Property Group's maintenance records surfaced something else entirely. 14 separate written complaints about the Rutledge's broken exterior lock, filed by different tenants over nearly 2 years, all logged and never actioned. The same lock that had been broken the night I was assaulted. A maintenance technician named Dale Pruitt had serviced all 3 buildings connected to the pattern. A court-ordered DNA sample, obtained on the strength of the key access evidence and the cross-building pattern, matched the forensic evidence from my case. He was arrested in April, 10 months after my wedding, charged, tried in the fall, convicted on all counts in November, almost exactly 2 years to the week after the night in the elevator. I sat in that courtroom, my hand in Elijah's, and I did not make a sound when the verdict was read. There wasn't anything left to say that the verdict hadn't already said for me. There's one more thing I want to tell you, because it matters more to me than the conviction did. In February this year, I testified, not in a courtroom this time, but at a Charleston City Council hearing on a proposed building safety ordinance requiring third-party inspection and enforcement of exterior security systems in multi-unit residential buildings, with real financial penalties for repeated, ignored complaints. I sat at a small table with a microphone and told a room full of council members about a broken lock that 14 tenants had reported and no one had fixed. and about what that failure had cost. I didn't cry. I'd done all my crying already, on a porch step, the night before my wedding. The ordinance passed in April. People in Charleston now call it, informally, the Rutledge Rule. I didn't ask for that. I'm not sure how I feel about it, some days. But I know my mother cried when she heard it, and I know Elijah keeps a printed copy of the council minutes in his desk drawer at school, for reasons he's never fully explained to me, and that I've never needed him to. Here's what I want you to take from this. I spent 18 months believing that telling the truth would cost me the person I loved most. What it actually cost me was 18 months of carrying something alone that was never mine to carry alone in the first place. The moment I chose myself, chose honesty over performance, chose my own case over my own comfort, everything I was afraid of losing stayed exactly where it was. And something else, something I hadn't even known I needed, came with it. If you're sitting with a truth you've been afraid to say out loud, I hope this told you something worth hearing. The people who actually love you were never going anywhere. Have you ever finally said the hard thing and had it go better than you let yourself believe it would? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. A gentle note. This story touches on sexual assault and its aftermath. If any part of this affected you personally, please know that support is available and you don't have to carry it alone.